14,000 jobs and $265 million a year. Those are the stakes involved in the plan to abandon Lake Michigan car ferry service. Hearings on the railroad's petitions to drop the ferries move to Green Bay and Manitowoc next week. And tonight, Dan Schillinger begins a series of reports on what it all means to Wisconsin.
There are now 3 separate ferry lines crossing the lake between Wisconsin and Michigan. The Grand Trunk Western operates a freight-only line between Milwaukee and Muskegon. The Ann Arbor, under a state federal subsidy arrangement, runs ferries between Kewanee and Frankfort. And the biggest ferry operator, the Chesapeake in Ohio, operates 3 ships between the Wisconsin ports of Milwaukee, Manitowoc, and Kewanee, and their home base at Ludington, Michigan. The Chessie and the Grand Trunk Western are seeking abandonment. The continued operation of the ferry system is very important to business and industry in the Fox River Valley because many of the paper products and other goods manufactured in Wisconsin are shipped out east by way of these boats. If the ferry routes did not exist, all of that freight would have to go around Lake Michigan instead of across it. Assistant Attorney General Mike Perino is battling the railroads on behalf of Wisconsin. He thinks the increased freight rates are just the tip of the economic iceberg that would be exposed if abandonment is allowed.
There are industries, obviously, that employ people that utilize the car ferries for shipping, and so it's like anything else. There are interrelationships that go far beyond immediate associations with an employment that has a bearing on the state economy in general.
Chessie attorney Albert Lazy disagrees.
Where he wants his cars. We have stipulated to the record that in the event that we are permitted to abandon this service, we will not raise the rates to or from the eastern markets. And the Commission can make that a condition of this proceeding in the event the abandonment application is granted.
But state and federal officials doubt any freight rate structure could ever be made permanent, so they say they're fighting abandonment to the end. Dan Schillinger, Eyewitness News.
Almost 160,000 people crossed Lake Michigan on the C&O Railroad's car ferries in 1976. Despite that, the railroad wants to dump the service. The ICC will hold hearings on that request next week in Green Bay and in Manitowoc. Tonight, in part 2 of our series on the ferries, Dan Schillinger examines the ship's passenger potential.
Ever since passenger service was introduced at the turn of the century, a summer trip across Lake Michigan on the ferry has been one of this area's prime tourist attractions. Back in 1955, the Chesapeake and Ohio ferries carried just under 250,000 people between Wisconsin and Michigan.
I think it's the idea of people coming here, being able to go aboard a boat, have their meals. It's more or less like an ocean cruise. In the summertime, these people can enjoy. It's a little added attraction on their vacation.
But passenger traffic, like freight traffic, has dropped off sharply in the past few years. That drop-off is especially noticeable in the winter. In the summertime, the decks of these ships are crowded with hundreds of tourists. But in the winter, there are rarely more than a dozen on board at any given time. The railroads say that that is part of the problem in trying to operate these ferries, but the government says that is the railroad's fault. They say that there are fewer people riding in the winter because of the unusual schedules that the Chessie system operates under during the winter months. A bi-state task force last year concluded that much of the regular season decline was also due to a deliberate effort on the part of the railroad to divert traffic elsewhere. C&O attorney Albert Lazy says that was the only sensible thing to do.
It just didn't make economic sense and wasn't consistent with sound business judgment to continue this alternate service when we had a better service, a cheaper service through Chicago.
The task force which studied the ferries last year concluded that passenger revenues could be substantial if the ships were managed properly. They claim the passenger end alone could turn a profit. Nonetheless, the railroads want out. Dan Schillinger, Eyewitness News.